Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the GepRC CineLog35. And oftentimes with these we think of them as kind of versatile CineWhoops. And the CineWhoops had those traditional big, thick prop protection that, didn't have any air holes for the props to breathe through. But GepRC came along with the CineLog and they made the CineLog25, one of mine that is a favorite of mine for this form factor. It's a pusher. And the next one was the 3-inch CineLog, the CineLog 3, and it's also a pusher. Still very similar prop protection design. But this one, they've changed things up a little bit. They've added these vents around here, and they've added a little bit of flare as well. Still basic, same overall design. It's got a platform up here with gummies, but they've put screws in the top, so now that platform is going to be secure. It wouldn't pop off. I don't know if anyone's had troubles with that, but it certainly shouldn't happen with these big bolts and nuts through there. And it's made for primarily carrying a GoPro, which it does come with a 3D printed TPU case that you can mount to the top, and you can use a full-size GoPro like 9 or 10 with it. I don't have one of those because I'm a micro guy, so as you can see from there, I put my Go 2 in there. And it seems to me to cut right to the chase before we get through all the different flight footage and stuff. If you're looking at these and you're wondering, where the market is for you, I really think it's from talking to different people and from my own experience with this and on the channel that it's kind of two sorts of markets. One, you like to go out and cruise and you like to get your smooth, stable shots. They do have analog versions of this, so you don't have to have DJI, but in this case it is DJI, the Caddx Vista with the polar camera. But you're going to get a real scenic place. Maybe you live somewhere up in the mountains, or you just have a really cool landscape feature that you're traveling through the hills or somewhere for, and you want to get out and do that nice slow pass through. Maybe you just like the extra safety that they have with these. Possibly if you hit something or someone or an animal or something like that, that you won't harm them. Could be that as well. Those are really the two things I think of when it comes to these sorts of things, but these are actually more versatile than just the slow, cruisy flight. They're fairly agile. It's muted because you're carrying more weight than if you didn't have all the prop protection, but for something with the prop protection and made kind of to do that slow, cruisy flight, they fly. All three of these, they fly pretty well if you want to go out and do some flips and tricks, and you're going to sacrifice again with the additional weight of the prop protection, but it makes it more than just a single trick pony. I have the 4S edition, so my CineLog35 is powered by the GR2004, in other words 2000 series motor that is 2550 kV. Of course, right down in there, that's our Caddx Vista, and as you can probably tell, it's a little hard to get to that USB port. Kind of need a adapter there. And look at that. The Nebula Pro camera is our FPV camera. So yeah, we can do high quality as well as low latency mode at 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second. We can fly 4.3, which is what I did in this video, or 16:9 if that's what we prefer. The props on the CineLog35 are the D90, and they are tri-bladed props. Flight controller is the GepRC F722. It's a 45 amp all-in-one flight controller. A little closer look at our camera platform up here and the gummies and these screws that are holding everything together. Yes, the FPV camera is attached to that platform as well. Oh, looks like I have a screws coming loose. See that right there? Need to tighten that sucker up. The antenna attached to the Caddx Vista or the Air Unit Lite is the Momoda, and it's the long version. As you can tell out there, it's 175 millimeters long. As I mentioned in the intro, it does come with a 3D printed TPU mount for your GoPro Hero 9 or 10. We also get a USB cable to plug in our flight controller. For some reason, I got a control board for an analog camera. I don't suspect that'll be in every box. We get some antenna tubes and end caps in case you get the analog version. Some spare props. Also note inside that bag are the adapters to make these T-mounted props work. We get some extra dampening for our camera platform. We get a cable to plug in, say, a naked GoPro or other sorts of external HD camera. Looks like we get several different nuts we can use for mounting that external HD camera. 2 Allen keys, a couple of more M2 nuts, some 7mm long M2 screws. We get 2 foam pads to put on the bottom for safe landing, but it has these little knobs off the top of off the bottom of our prop protection. So this doesn't actually hit, but The foam is a nice safe protection, and you get 2 of them. We also get 2 battery mats, 9mm M2 screws. I believe this is a print to hold an analog receiver, but I'm just flying with the DJI remote. We get an extra battery strap. Geez, more screws. These are 8mm M2 screws. And a wrench. Mine also had a GepRC keychain. We also get a full color guide for wiring. It looks like we get both versions in this. GepRC support card. And 3 sheets of stickers. 2 of them are blue. It weighs 247.25 grams. I flew it exclusively on these RDQ of 850 milliamp 4S batteries, which brings the weight up to almost 346 grams. Of course, I did my HD recording with the Insta360 Go 2. We better add that. My total flying weight is 372.5 grams. The carbon fiber plate looks to be 3.5 millimeters thick, which is very, very close to what it was on the CineLog3. Motor post to motor post, it looks like 143 millimeters. So first off, I have to apologize. I'm going to ruin your view a little bit because this is my go-to recording and you are going to see a little bit of my mount. But that's probably one of the main reasons why my lens is still in good shape, because I've crashed this poor little camera quite a few times, and I don't think I have any scratches or dings or anything in the lens, so I have mounts like this one and this one to thank for that. But we're starting off with a faster flight. This is what I like to do. I like to go faster. I like to punch out over the house. I like to swing around the trees, maybe shoot little gaps, things of that nature, and just have a good time. And these are capable, unlike, our first iteration of traditional cine whoops or sin whoops that we've seen for so long. We spent, 2 years with those sin whoops that were just like flying pizza boxes. Who would have thought of power looping a flying pizza box like those original old sin whoops? So these are all fairly agile. They've got a lot of weight to them, so they're not going to be high flyers and high performance, but they have that safety. I do have a crash that I will show you. I think there's actually 3 crashes I'm going to show you, and that way you can get an idea for the prop protection and how robust it is. Obviously, I didn't break it in all my flights. If you're not familiar with the channel, I tend to take a little longer in my reviews. I don't do one-day reviews or one-flight reviews. I usually spend a week to 2 weeks flying these things around. Sometimes it takes me even longer because of weather. But I got a good, nice, sunny day here. One thing I will give you a quick tip on, and we'll kind of highlight this a little bit, is we have to check our camera. Like initially, I'm talking about the FPV camera. Initially, I found that the FPV camera had a little bit of a jitter to it, or jello, you might call it, a little bit of movement when I was flying it. And so I took it back inside, gave both screws on the camera about a half turn more, and that took care of it. We need to check out our screws. I should have done a better job of going around the quad and making sure the screws were pretty tight. I probably wouldn't have caught the camera screws because you don't want to hunker those down right from the get-go. And it is mounted with those TPU mounts, so if you get real tough with it, you're going to pull the screw head, that is, right through that TPU print. So, and then you're not able to hold your camera very well at all, which would make people sad. This flight in total, with the flight style that you see in front of you, with the wind you may have heard before we took off from the table, it's going to run 3 minutes, and I think my notes say 3 minutes and 13 seconds. The slower flight, where you're doing more of a capture the shot, sort of cruising, maybe going up a hill or what have you, maybe circling something, a statue in a city square, that on the same battery is going to be 5 minutes and 22 seconds. So obviously, the more you ask of the quad and to give you in performance, the more your flight time comes down. And I think it's very reasonable, depending upon what sort of flight you're wanting to look at doing a larger battery. I even think maybe flying aggressively with a 1100 battery would be very, very doable on this particular quad. You see here, we're going to come into land, and I'm going to bounce it a bit. I hit the wrong switch. Whoops. Wrong switch. Now we're set up to go for our slower flight. We're not going to watch all this. As I said, this goes on for 5 minutes and 22 seconds. Obviously, it's a different day. It's very dreary. This was during a period where we were getting pretty frequent rains. I believe this was at the end of that period. I think I started flying this the beginning of that rainy period, and then we had like 3 days consistently of rain and maybe some spotty rain on a 4th day before I was comfortable enough going out and flying and making sure that I wouldn't damage anything by getting it wet. Of course, if we're worried about wetness on our quads, we can always conformal coat, but I don't do that for product reviews. That's I try not to do any modifications of products when I'm doing a review on them. Now, if something is just so bad that it's unflyable or it's it needs correction right away. I guess those are very rare occasions, but that could happen. But for the most part, outside of just changing some OSD elements and setting up the radio for how I like to have them set up, I fly them just like they come out of the box. Go over to my neighbor's place here back by the creek. We haven't been back here in a while. We got some water down in that creek, just kind of doing some exploring. And I guess this is a market that I kind of miss, not only the safety and the sin whooping, but just exploration. I've talked to many people who like to do just exploration sort of flights, and all flights, in my opinion, are fun. It doesn't matter what kind of fun you want to have. Go have your sort of fun and enjoy yourselves. That's what life's all about. And that was a little sample of it, I think, going over to the creek and exploring that back area. I was just talking to my old neighbors who they moved out, what was it, about 3 years ago? I think it was. Some of the longtime subscribers can remember that. But they came back to the neighborhood. They were in town for, I think it was a baby shower. So they stopped by the neighborhood, and so I got to spend about a half hour talking to them before they had to go to that baby shower. It was really good to see them. They're living in Idaho now, and they are grandparents 5 times over, I think. And I remember when they lived next door, all their kids were still in high school and middle school, and now they have kids of their own. Man, time. It doesn't stop, does it? It's crazy. So it was nice to get to see them, and hopefully you've seen enough of this sort of slow, smooth, cruisy flight. I want to move a little bit forward so we don't have a terrible long video here on you. So this is my slow flight, and this is our view from the goggles. Obviously, I have the goggles set to 4:3. You might prefer 16:9. With the Nebula Pro camera, you can do that. You can switch it back and forth. But I wanted to show you this because it highlights that jitter, and then I'll show you another segment that highlights that just that half turn on each side of the camera mount screws. That took care of it. But this also gives you an idea of what you see in the goggles if you're not familiar with it. I always try to keep in mind that not everybody has got their pulse on the FPV world, and DJI Caddx Vista Air Unit Lite, that all might be new to someone who's watching the video for the first time. So obviously our FPV view, what we see in the goggles, is quite remarkable. Does require DJI goggles. They look like a bug. I don't know what their names are. They have a specific name? It's escaping me now. Because I know DJI made other goggles that were for their Mavic Phantom sort of camera drones or some other sort of camera drone. Anyways, so it's got 4 antennas on it. Maybe that's a way you can distinguish it. But so we've got a little bit of jitter in here. So let's move into that next flight that doesn't have the jitter. So this is obviously a much faster flight, and I know it's going to be harder to tell, but I did not spend a lot of time flying it slow. I think I went through 4 different batteries just to kind of get a fix on the flight time to see if I had, one battery just wasn't holding mustard anymore, and then that was it. Oh, and I get to show you that crash I was talking about. Banged right into that tree full bore. So you might be surprised to find out, that camera footage, yeah, I came out of that janky camera. Of course, in the crash, it kind of got shoved around. I'm a terrible 3D printer. I haven't spent a lot of time learning about 3D printing. I am at best a hack. But I was talking about tightening the camera. So we have screws on both sides here. Hopefully you can see that right down in there. Just a half turn on that took care of the little jitter that I had in there. I didn't find the dampening created a problem. Obviously, I've got one screw that has come loose during my flight time with it, so I'll need to tighten that back up. But this is, again, made where you can have all sorts of different HD cameras that could be mounted up here. It does come with this mount as well, and this is a plastic molded mount. This is not a printed mount. Hopefully that's clear in the video. They've obviously set these up to toilet tank. That's where you run your battery sideways. I don't think that's a term I originated, but it's a term that I've been using for a while to describe when your battery goes sideways. I actually prefer that. When I build a quad, if I can, I will set up the quad to toilet tank the battery, regardless of whether it's top mounted or bottom mounted. I mentioned it previously that the USB port is a little bit hard to get to. The USB port for the Vista in here isn't terrible, because you can kind of, if you get the right size of connector for your USB-C connection, you can kind of get it between the motor and the gap. They did cut a gap in the prop protection here. Hopefully you can see that. That's all right. But getting to the flight controller, if you can see there, I don't know if I've got enough light. Basically, just to the left of this post is the flight controller USB port. So what I found was I had an extension, and the kit does not come with an extension, but I have an extension that is skinnier than a traditional USB cable. I think I have the extension out right over here. Let me get it. Yeah. So this was the extension that I used in order to be able to get in there without disassembling it. And for comparison purposes, if we compare it to a traditional USB, you can, well, I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this. This is much more narrow. So it allows me to sneak past that post that's right there, whereas this or others like it wouldn't. And I don't know, maybe it's a packing issue with mine, but GepRC generally does a really good job of making sure you have everything you need. And just as a little proof of concept, let me see if I can wiggle it in there. Yeah, there we go. So you can see it just sneaks by that post. So if you've got a full wide USB, a traditional USB cable, going to have some disassembly to do in order to get that connected, because we are going to need to get it connected to make sure we set up our switches, set up your OSD elements, any sort of the Betaflight configuration stuff that we need to do when we first get started. And when I pull this out, because it's so tight in here, I have to use needle nose, and I just kind of wiggle it back and forth, trying to be very gentle here. There, got it. As far as this prop protection and being robust, you know, I had several crashes and I didn't have any problems with the prop protection. They're all in perfectly good shape. You can see here, especially on the bottom, how they're attached, not just mounted to the motors in the top, but on the bottom, we have pieces that mount to these screw holes all the way around. And those posts, they go actually through all the way to the bottom. So they're not just, you know, the plastic holding it in there. We've got a post inside. Hopefully you can tell that post, the plastic that makes up our prop protection, is actually bigger around than the post. Maybe this is a better way to show that. I don't think I need better lighting. Let me see if I can grab some more lighting. Is that any better? So the prop protection part is thicker than the post, so the post goes down through there. So it keeps it from sandwiching together if it didn't, and it also gives it some extra stability and rigidity. And it is, for a prop protection, while it's flexible, you want it to be somewhat flexible in my opinion, so it can, you know, bounce off hitting something. It's pretty stiff, and you know, it's gonna need to be relatively stiff, especially if you're carrying a 1300 milliamp battery, or you're carrying a big 6S battery. They do have a 6S version. Yeah, it's gonna need to be able to take it. You can see this prop right here is pretty chewed up. I guess I must have had a crash and maybe didn't disarm quite quickly enough or something like that. There was something, oh yes, GepRC has recently been adding these little wires, sheaths. They're plastic. In theory, what that does is if you were to hit a prop and it were to bend a prop, that it wouldn't be able to cut through your motor wires. It would then hit that plastic, and that plastic would shield the motor wires from being cut. Now, I've heard that that doesn't work great. I've heard what works better is taking a part of a broken prop and taping it down on the arm. So, but in my case, I haven't had that happen, so I can't report from firsthand experience of whether these little plastic sheaths do the job or not. And the final thing is, if you're looking at this, I suspect you're looking at this because you're going to be filming in a large space, probably outside space, and you need to go a little bit faster than the 3 or the 2.5 can do, which is understandable. 2.5 is probably best for indoor sorts of close proximity sort of stuff. It's smaller, it's carrying less weight, can still do the job very effectively. Whereas if you're outside, maybe you want to chase somebody on a motorcycle or a bicycle or mountain biking, skateboarding, on a scooter, you know, anything that carries more speed than, say, a human self-powered. I don't think you're going to be chasing cars, at least not fast cars with this. But if you're looking to do that sort of thing, this is the one I would suggest getting if you're wanting something with prop protection and you don't want to build. There are other options if you want to build, but I suspect if you're a builder, you're probably already looking at those other options and you're not even watching this part of the video. So if you're looking for a bind and fly that can do that sort of job, I think it's for those faster than human powered sort of chasing or filming sort of scenes. Maybe you want to keep up with some wildlife, possibly. I think this would be close, but this isn't going to fly as long. I really think for the most purposes, whether it's flying to get a shot or if it's flying for fun, that you're probably, and you're looking at the GepRC lineup, you're probably looking at a choice between these two. For me, this is still more fun for me because it's smaller. I'm a micro guy. I like micros. But if you want some bigger performance, this is definitely going to do it. Now, the price point may be something that you want to be concerned about because this little guy is not free or cheap. Looks like the price ranges from low $400 to upwards of $450. Depends on your options. They've got a 4S and a 6S edition. So if you get the TBS receiver with it, then the price starts to go up more. Of course, that price that I talked about is with the version that you see here with the Nebula Pro and the Caddx Vista Air unit in it here. The analog version is less expensive. It comes in between $289 to $318. Of course, that you can find different pricing possibly at different vendors. I'll see who's got this for sale, and I'll put links down in the video description to all the resellers that I can find. You can vote with your dollar if you're wanting to buy this or something else from one of those vendors. Choose the vendor that you like. I always try to put the vendor first and then the link second. That way you know I'm not trying to get you to trickily, that's a word, click on any sort of links. I'm a firm believer as a previous small business owner that you need to vote with your dollar. For the shops that you like the most, you should spend your dollar there as long as they have the product that you want. But if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comments section below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.